Hey, everybody. Before we get started with this week's episode of the podcast, I want to remind you to please like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. This week, we talked with my good friend Maddie, who is a part of many philanthropical organizations, and I will put their descriptions and link below to several that she's affiliated with. And this week, we'll be talking about community and how to get that started. Well, thank you everyone again for tuning into another episode of Your Day with David. And today is Your Day with David and Maddie. Uh, Maddie is the first person in the dance community that I have brought on to this show. Although obviously there are a lot of different things about Maddie besides dance. In fact, that's a couple things that I want to go over. And she doesn't know it, but kind of the reason why I brought her on is I want to talk a little bit about community. Maddie is involved in several different communities, and I'll let her kind of go into as we go on. But she has a lot of similarities to me, and she moved away from her hometown way back in the day. Kind of came to here in St. Louis, and as far as I know, didn't have any family or friends here when you came, or is that wrong?
I had an aunt and uncle, but they live like in the suburbs, so didn't see
Okay,
them
they
a
don't
lot.
count. Yeah, we don't count them. No. Well, and so like for me, I remember when I initially moved to St. Louis 4 years ago, I nothing, right? No family, no friends. Quite frankly, didn't even I don't even know um, if I had any good interpersonal skills at the time. Um, and then I think my initial connections as to how I got networked around the city was just through work, because that's why I came to St. Louis anyway. And then you meet people and so on and so forth. But before I give too many spoilers about her, um, now, did you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, and then I will tell people about as much I know about you too.
Phew, okay. It's funny that you didn't tell me that you wanted to talk about community and that we're talking about community because it's probably like one of my favorite things to talk about and
Mm,
one of the things I'm most passionate about that's like a little bit more profound.
mm.
I'd say other things that I'm passionate about are like ice cream and running and dancing and
That is
um,
profound.
yeah, I mean they do lead to profound topics because I love them for very like different reasons. And so if you get me talking about them, a lot of times they inevitably like lead to community. But
Yeah.
yeah, so those are things that I'm passionate about. I am originally from Louisville, Kentucky. I did move away quite a while ago when I was 18, coming to college in St. Louis. Um, yeah, came to WashU, studied international affairs and Spanish, and
Mm,
then my career trajectory kind of radically changed from what I thought it was going to be. I wanted to go like into diplomacy and yeah,
mm.
international affairs, and um, sometime in college, like different experiences kind of led me to really like radically rethink like what spheres I wanted to be in. And
Yeah.
so after I graduated, I ended up doing a year of service in Guayaquil, Ecuador, with an organization called Rosario de Cristo, which is super small. And then I landed right back in St. Louis for the past 3 years
Yeah.
at WashU. So
Doing a little bit of teaching in the same field that you went to school for.
yeah, actually, it's very interconnected, which is kind of funny because it's the same program that I majored in. Is
Yeah.
I now work for them. I also like was a work study student in the program, and I also did the first year program that I now lead and teach. Um, so it's kind of like yeah, being this like mentor for all these people who are going along very similar like paths that I did. All with like different journeys and whatnot. But yeah, it's been cool to like go back to that space and be able to say like, okay, like what did I want that I didn't get there, and like how can I do that?
Yeah. Bueno.
You know?
That's nice. So I will share again how I initially met Maddie, because it was kind of I think with most things in life, it's kind of a friend of a friend situation. But I uh, started dancing. I went. There's this place in St. Louis where we go to, or I go to twice a week at that time on Thursdays and Saturdays, and they teach this free lesson in dance, and we've all been there. It's a lot of fun, especially if you're like me that have two left feet, don't know anybody, but everyone there is just to have a good time. And uh, I did that for a couple months, and at some point, you're not really learning anything new by going to those free lessons. And so I signed up for what we call the progressive class, and where I got to meet a couple of our mutual friends, Veronica and Claire. And um, and I think you knew Veronica through work, right,
Mhm.
at WashU.
Mhm. And I knew Claire through Veronica, but yeah,
Okay, so Veronica was the like the initial person you knew in that group. Is that right, or just
in
through?
that group, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And this is what I'm talking about. As we will talk about, there's a lot of interwoven friend groups now in this situation. But Veronica as well, um, voice correct number one for those counting. Veronica is one of those people that a very what I'll say maybe infectious personality, or not hesitant to kind of be outgoing or high energy output to people. And so I just remember after a couple of weeks in our class with her and Claire were talking about the big monthly swing dance social, because they're also part of the swing dance community too. Um, and they had invited me to go to that as well. Um, and I'll fast forward a little bit. Basically, started going to those, and then other swing dance events, and continue the classes. And over time, you just kind of end up being friends. But I think I was very fortunate in the fact that Raka and Claire, I guess, saw me as a person that you know we'd continue hanging out. I guess you know. I think that was like a worry of mine, was after our monthly lesson was over, I would never see them again. They'd fade off into oblivion, and I'd be back at square one. But that just wasn't how it turned out. And then how I got to meet Maddie was after one of those lessons. Claire normally wouldn't stay for the kind of after that, when people start social dancing and whatnot. But that night she was like, "Oh, I got some friends coming, and so I actually will stay tonight." And that was how I got to meet you and your roommate, Carolina. And yeah, and then I'm not really sure. I was trying to think about this the other day, uh, but it was kind of maybe just random events unfolding that eventually got to know about you and some of the communities you're involved in, and then watched you also run at the St. Louis Marathon too. And I was like, okay, you know what, like I'm part of this group too, or at least the friend group, and got to meet. If I try to remember all the names right,
Uh,
Carly, Leah, Ellen, Matt, anyone I'm missing there, probably a few, but really great people, really great people. And so I'll start with kind of that first community that I got to meet Maddie with, because I'm interested to see what your thoughts on it are versus mine. But could you tell me a little bit like how you initially started dancing, and what the dance community means for you, right?
yeah, this is like serendipitous time to be having this conversation also, since I'm like leaving St. Louis soon. And
Yeah,
just like this past week, it's really started to like hit me in different spaces. I'll just realize like how much I have here. And um yeah, been getting like pretty emotional about it. And I think the dance community is a really fun one for me to like reflect on, because I haven't necessarily reflected on it too much.
it's just been
But
there, right?
yeah, it's just, well, it's evolved in ways
Yeah,
that other communities in St. Louis like haven't necessarily, or like
sure.
we're always there. And so I guess I had always wanted to go to Viva Club Viva, this dance place where we go, um, when I was an undergrad, but it's 21 plus. I was like young for my age, and so I only went one time in St.
Mm,
Louis before, like right after I graduated. We went for the lessons. It was fun. I liked it. But then I left for Ecuador. And in I guess also like in college, I had taken a semester long swing and Latin dance course,
Hmm.
and that
Okay.
was kind of one of my first introductions to salsa, a little bit of cha cha, swing, um, and yeah, I don't know. I really loved it because it was really challenging for me, and it was also when you like perform, we did like a little, semester performance. It gave me that same rush that I get when like I'm running a race. Like right
Hmm.
after I run a race, you get that like high and that like adrenaline, endorphins.
Yeah.
Um, and so then in Ecuador, like everyone listens to salsa and bachata music, and everyone
Hmm.
pretty much like knows the basic steps and stuff. And so while we didn't do a lot of like partner dancing in Ecuador, it would be on like all the time, like 24/7 in the neighborhood blasting, or like on our stereo in our kitchen. And we would be like just dancing and cooking at the same time. And so I started to learn, that's where I first learned bachata steps. And kind of the more you immerse yourself in the music, the easier it is to like pick up a step and like get the beat. And
Yeah.
so I think that that really set me up well to like then be able to come back to St. Louis. And I lived on the same street as Club Viva then. And so I was, like even before I got to St. Louis, after Ecuador, I was like, I'm going to go to Club Viva, and it's going to be great, because one thing that I was really going to miss from Ecuador was like the music. Like
Yeah.
there's always music, and everyone's like always moving.
Yeah.
And I wanted to like make sure that I had that space in St. Louis where I could go and like listen to like Spanish music, and dance. And so I started going, and I would drag different people with me almost every week at the beginning. A lot of times my roommate would come, other times I would have to persuade and like bribe random other friends to come, but they would always, come for the lessons and then leave, because like after the lessons, it's a lot of like free dance, and if you don't know what you're doing, it can be like very intimidating.
Yeah.
And so the more that I went to the free lessons, the more I like kind of like met people who would just like dance with me. And like whenever I like kind of like didn't get their cue, I would be like, oh, like, can you teach me that? And they'd be like, yeah, yeah. And so they'd slow it down and like teach me a new move. And so, started recognizing familiar faces, and eventually I guess got to the point where I was just comfortable like staying by myself.
Hmm.
Like my friends would come for the lessons, they would like head out, I would stay for a little bit. There were definitely a couple times where like I tried really hard to get my roommate to come with me, and I was like, you know what, Maddie, like you're going by yourself. And so I would go by myself. And I think that that was another thing that I loved about Vivo, is that you could go and like just be standing by yourself, like watching all these amazing dancers, and not feel awkward. And like no one was really like judging you that you were there alone.
Yeah.
And I never felt unsafe, or like that people were trying to like hit on me or anything like that. And,
Yeah.
and so it very much felt like a different type of space. It's not a bar, it's not a club. It's like, it's Viva.
Yeah. Something in
Um,
between.
yeah, so that was one thing that I really loved about it. And then also just the like diversity of it, I think is really cool, because in St. Louis it's like a very segregated city, whether you're talking about like ethnicity,
Yeah.
race, like socioeconomic class, like everything is pretty segregated. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to find spaces where you have a diversity of people to meet. And I felt that Viva definitely offers that, and also age. I was like really impressed that, there were like, what, like I feel like the oldest person there is like probably like in late 60s. And they're just like out
Maybe
dancing and
older.
having a good
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
I mean, how old is
Uh,
Pop?
so yeah, I just kind of like started really loving the space and the environment that it offered. And then, sorry, this is a very long answer, but I guess that's like what the podcast is for. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so then the pandemic hit,
Hmm.
and obviously that was the last place that I wanted to go. And a lot of people wanted to go. And so I think it shut down for a little bit, like the very beginning, and then kind of opened up. But the first time that I went again was about June
Hmm.
2021.
Okay.
When
Almost a
my
year ago.
Yeah, when one of my current roommates, different roommate, Carolina, moved to St. Louis. We had done the Ecuador program together, and she social dances, like she grew up dancing. And so I was like, we got to go to Viva. And so we started going together, and like she fell in love too. And then I always had like, every week she would drive. She lived like 20, 25 minutes away at that time.
Oh,
And she
really?
would drive every Thursday and we would go. And then it like got even better because once you have like somebody to kind of like socialize with, you like start meeting people, and we were able to
Yeah.
stay later. I would, and so I started meeting more and more people. And then I think it like really, really took off for me, like the community there, when my friend Jim moved back to St. Louis, because he also is like an amazing dancer. He also did Rostro, the Ecuador program, and his wife was currently still in Ecuador at the time and hadn't moved yet. And so he was really looking for things to distract him.
Oh, I didn't know
And
she
so
stayed.
yeah, she only
Wow.
came in January, at the end of January, I think. And so there
Oh,
were like
wow.
several months where they were separated, like different
Oh, I didn't
continents.
know that.
Yeah, so he would come. I remember the first week he was here, he got here on like maybe like a Monday, and I was like, Heme, we're going dancing on Thursday. And he's like, okay. And we shut down the place. And I had never stayed that late at Viva. And I was like, that was so much fun, Jim. Like, that was amazing. And like, he's an amazing lead. And I had never had like a friend that like was, like
Yeah.
like could be like my backup, or like not my backup, but like my go-to partner. And I was like, this is great.
My bad.
And so then I was like, we're going Saturday again. And so then we went like 2 times that week. And that was the first time that I had like ever gone to Viva twice in 1 week.
Wow.
It's like, October.
Big moment for Maddie.
Yeah.
Wow, that's just
Yeah,
October too. That's crazy because
yeah,
I
it's all like it's all like escalated in this past, like, several months,
yeah,
past year. And yeah, Jim is also just a very extroverted person and like makes friends with whoever he meets. And so you just keep meeting people, and yeah, keep expanding the crowd and inviting people in. And it's been really cool because now I never have to go alone anymore.
yeah,
But I don't think that I could even consider like me going alone. Like going alone. Like if I
yeah,
drove there and walked in by myself, yeah, like I'm going alone, but I would inevitably see like 10 people that I know that I would like
yeah.
talk to and stuff. And that's like a crazy feeling.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
how it was for me too. Because I remember those first 2 months when I was doing the free lesson. Like you
mhm.
said, for people that don't really know dance, it's very intimidating, right? You're
Yeah.
looking at this dance floor, people, everyone is doing these moves that you have no idea what's going on, and so you don't really even want to ask. In my case, I never want to ask anyone to dance with me because I just felt um well, for instance, like if there's this follow, I would watch this person dance. I'd be like, wow, I'd really want to dance with that person, but they just got dancing with this amazing lead, and so I'm going to go in right after that great performance with this crappy dance, and I just wouldn't want to ruin her night. Not that it would ruin that person's night. um and so I had to slowly come to terms with a couple things. One, the only way to get better is to just dance with those people anyway. And two, they forever, for the rest of your life, there will always be someone that dances better than you. So why
Of
does it
course.
matter?
There will
Hmm.
always be someone worse too.
There will always be someone worse too. And that's the cool thing is you'll in my case, I actually do a little bit of teaching now at the club, depending on the certain night of the week. And I'll help these people that were basically me.
Hmm.
That's the thing. I think that's why I found so much fulfillment in it is, they're apologizing, they're they're laughing, they're embarrassed, and I'm just like, wow, just 3 months ago, I'm just staring at a mirror,
Hmm.
of who these people are. um and it's funny too because I do follow work as well, so it's not just say stereotypically guys that I'm watching that I'm having a great time with, but like women as well, and there's plenty of women that lead too, but all of them just trying to learn. And I think it's interesting too, asking anyone how they get started, dancing, because I don't know. I think maybe a long time ago, dance was probably had a stronger community in even just America, but over time, that tradition might have faded out for one reason or another, and I could be wrong with that. But I mean, so like for dancing for me, I mean, because it came at a very important time for in my life where I needed to get out of My apartment, I had no idea what to do. I had other friend groups, but for one reason or another, whether it's intentional or unintentional, maybe pushed some of them away, and so I just um, I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay home, and it was just this routine where every Thursday and every Saturday, as Carlos would say, every Thursday, every Saturday, um, I knew I could keep myself busy from 8 till 10:30, right? Um, and um, I've told this to other people, and I also told them not to tell you guys. But meeting you, Caro, Veronica, um, Jaime, uh, potentially saved my life, kind of thing. It was, and it's almost interesting looking back, just like how uh, I'll say it, I was kind of like a broken person back in December era, if I will. But it's almost weird because I look back at that person and it's a completely different person from who I am now.
Mhm.
You know, um, I think there was someone had asked me the other day, is like, yeah, are you happy? And for the first, it was probably the first time in half a year, I was like, you know what, like life is good. You know, there are always things in life going on where like there's stressors, right? Like things at work or whatever it might be, but those are very minimal compared to the impact of what else I was suffering with. So um, that's what dance has been for me. So that community um, gave me a lot of um, stuff to look forward to, because I used to be a five sport athlete back in the day, but I didn't play collegiate sports, and so
Mhm.
I'd always like, it's a great way to stay active, but then I also was able to kind of use salsa as a means to be competitive again as well.
Yeah.
Just, oh, these people are so good, I need to get better, and then taking, being part of the dance team there, and just, and I still like that. It's funny because I still consider myself a very poor dancer, and Claire actually gets mad at me when I say that, because she's like, David, you don't like, you're good at what I do. But I still just compare myself to all these other like very, very good dancers on the floor. And I think it's almost encouraging though. It's like, ideally down the road, I will then be that good.
Mhm.
And I'm not, so I don't know when I'm going to stop calling myself bad at dancing.
Yeah.
I think that's just the type of personality I have. But um, you know, who knows? As far, if I continue to say, even teach what I'm doing now, I'll look back at people that are as good as I am now, and I'll be like, oh, I was this person too. So that was also my long answer about what dancing has meant for me. Uh, but then, kind of on that note of, I didn't do collegiate sports. You did, right? So dance is one community of yours, but then you also have the running community. And I think there's a point where maybe not all of them were supposed to be still in the St. Louis area, but at some point now, there actually are quite a few
Mhm.
alumni from WashU that are in the area. So, and that's how I got to meet them. Can you expand a little bit more on what they've meant in your life? Or
Ooh, yeah, that's yeah, I think that our so I'll like refer to it like as WOXC. It's kind of like WOXCTF, like Washington University cross country and track and field. But
that's that's a mouthful. Okay.
yeah, I think that that's actually where I really fully grasped the like beauty of community was
Mm,
in college. We were lucky enough to have an amazing coach, Coach Styles, and he really instilled in like all the athletes. Like, one of his main things is like, I'm not just training you all to be good athletes. I'm training you all to become like good people.
mm,
And so it was always kind of like, school over running, mental health over running, like physical health over running, family over running. Like, you know, running was important to all of us, but he was very much like a very holistic coach, I would say. And so he created
More
this
of a
space for us to um, to really like come to love each other like
mm,
very, very deeply, and to push each other because we loved each other so much. And of course, like there are ups and downs with any competitive sport where you're competing for spots at like the top meets and stuff. But one of the best things about community, I think, and whether it's dance community, running community, like living community, is that you find ways to love people that you would not normally like initially feel inclined to love, or like that you maybe don't mesh with really well. And so like there are people on my team who I was like, yeah, if we were not on the same team, like no, like I would not be like going out of my way to spend time with you or whatever. But when you
yeah,
put us on a track together and we have to like work really hard together, and at the end like we're all like in pain, and we're like, yeah, we just did that side by side, it's just like it's this physical connection, and
yeah,
it's really amazing. And so I think that those 4 years running with my team and all of the people that I encountered really like impacted and shaped me.
mm,
And So, coming back from Ecuador, I moved in with an old teammate, Audrey, and we had never lived together. Also, it says time left. Is
yeah.
that
I'll work on that.
okay? Um, yeah, we had never lived together. We graduated together. We were always like close. But it was amazing. Like to this day, I think it's one of the most profound relationships I have with like a single individual human being, like outside of like a community. Um, and so actually Chelsea introduced me to this term soul sister. And I think that like we're like soul
Oh,
sisters. But yeah, so with her, we also like helped each other like and pushed each other to reach out to like our like alumni community and do like different fun things in St. Louis. And she's moved away, other people have moved away, but other people have moved back, and it's always cool to like hang out with them because it's this like shared history, and still that like shared bond. uh
hmm,
but it's also interesting because certain relationships there have evolved to be very like new and different. Like
sure.
I think my relationship with Sophie and like Leah are very, very different than they were in undergrad. A lot stronger, a lot closer. And then there are other people who like when we get together, it's kind of like you're like just reflecting on the good old times, and like it's nothing new
Yeah,
necessarily, but it's rough. It's like it's refreshing for a change. Just sit there and like hang out and like make the same old jokes over and over again. But yeah, I think that has been really interesting to have so many alumni here, because back in the day, how we connected was we ran together, we competed
mm,
together, we pushed each other. And now I still love running, but I've drifted away from that competitive aspect. And so I don't necessarily run with them all the time, just because sometimes it does bring back that unnecessary competitiveness. And I think that it can cause like strain on the relationships sometimes
um,
for my part. And I think that's something that I need to work on. And my
you
way of
think you're
working on it
overly
is,
competitive, or
yeah, just like, like a bunch of us were training for different marathons
right?
these past few months. And, oh my gosh, like they're running different workouts than me. Like, oh, they're running their long runs faster than me. And starting, like there's no reason to be competitive anymore. And so just kind of like managing that change in
Yeah.
those relationships has been interesting, and like also a really good lesson to reflect on, of like, uh, yeah, what do these people mean to me, and how can I best like foster those relationships? And if that means like not running with them as much and like doing new activities with them, then that's like what I need to do. So
Okay. Nice.
you're good.
Okay. Okay. Um, so talking about the competitive person you are, we just got done running the St. Louis Marathon. You went and did the Boston Marathon as well. over or rather satisfied with your performance there in Boston by chance, or it was fine?
It was fun.
Okay. And I know that there's people in that group. They're also getting, say, like, was it their doctorate or master's program? So they're going to be in the St. Louis area longer than initially planned, but you are not. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the last thing that kind of the final, at least community that I know. Actually, do I want to go there just yet? Because I almost want to talk a little bit too about some of the, this will lead into it, kind of the philanthropic part of your personality, maybe more the even events like, although you didn't get to go to it, but that the event at Wash U, that track event that you weren't able to go to because
Mhm.
you were sick, but all the alumni are in town, they are volunteering, right, at this track meet. Do you find yourself volunteering quite a bit as a person,
Oh
or
boy. Yeah. Um, I think over this past year, I've taken a step back, and that is very good for me. Not more just like I guess narrowing what
yeah,
I'm doing down to like a couple things. But whew, um, during COVID, when a lot of it was remote, and I just like wanted to feel connected and stuff, I think I stepped up in a bunch of different spaces. And then when social life started picking back up again, I was like, oh crap, like
yeah,
this is a lot. Um, but yeah, no, it's a strength flaw of mine. I think I just always want to again like dive into all of these communities, get to know people. I love building community and helping that and like expanding it. And so yeah, there was during the pandemic, there was a time where I was like volunteering, like interpreting at Casa de Salud, which is a nonprofit health clinic here. And so that was like via Zoom. And then I started like the refugee mentor program with the International Institute. And so like also via Zoom, like I was like
yeah.
a mentor for um, a like recent immigrant from Pakistan. Um, and then let's see, I am part of like a new running community that's associated with a running apparel brand from Seattle called Wazelle. And so they have kind of like a global running community where you like pay the membership, and then wherever you are in the world, you like connect via the app to your local team. And
uh,
so then I volunteered to be like one of the Missouri leaders to try and like help form community within the Vole community. Um,
so
and
so why how I think how is a better term. How did you get to be a person that gives so much of your time away like that? Was it growing up and that happened, like just the way you were raised? Did something, was there like a trigger where you're like, all right, I want to be the person that helps people? What happened?
yeah, I think from like a very young age, and I've had to like grapple with this um like the saviorism aspect of how I
Yeah,
was raised. But from a very young age, I was like, um I remember like very young, I was people asked me what I wanted to do, and I was like, I just want to help people. And I think it was a
yeah,
mix of coming from like a faith background. I was born and raised Catholic, and as much harm as like some faith communities can have on the world, there's also just so much good, um, and so much growth. And so I think that that was super formative, and there are certain things that like I have qualms about how I was raised, but overall like it made me who I was, and like made me want to I wouldn't phrase it as help people now, but like accompany people who are being like
mm,
oppressed by society. um but yeah,
uh,
like my grandma, she was always like volunteering at the local soup shelter, and doing all these things. And you have like volunteer things when you're in Catholic school and doing those. And um I think I also just like in high school I continued doing it because it again, it got me out into like different communities that I didn't. Louisville's also a very segregated city. And so you're not in those communities if you don't make that effort to go and find them and find ways to be like immersed in them. And for me, that has taken on the form of volunteering. And so that was a big thing for me coming back to St. Louis from Ecuador. Was I realized that I was now very comfortable being in like Latino communities and like connecting with them, even though like they have like a very different culture in many ways than I was born and raised in. But the thought of like coming to St. Louis and like the very strong like Black culture that's here, and that feeling so foreign, even
Hmm.
though like we're like there are similarities there. It's just like something that I've never been exposed to. And so trying to find different like ways to expose myself to I guess different ways of living, different ways
Yeah.
of like, yeah.
Which
um
is you.
so I
So,
think that it was a faith background, but also this desire to continue like finding places and people and spaces that help me grow as a person.
hmm. So speaking of being oppressed in society, that will transition us to maybe maybe what you consider your the most important community in your life. I could be wrong, but I mean, you're willing to go there for a year to Ecuador and leave everything behind. So this is what has this. Although there's a lot of things that I find very interesting about Maddie, this was what intrigued me the most was that you're a person who, you have all these connections here, all such good friends, good community that you put a lot of effort into building. And hopefully, as I'm saying this, it's not like swaying you to no longer go to Ecuador. You're like, ah, but um, I think a lot of people, both watching, listening, and anywhere in between, have a lot of what they call, consider responsibilities, a lot of things that tie them down to a certain area, in the world, um, for one reason or another. Um, but you're a person that is willing to say, you know what, I can just walk away from everything for a year, and that's still fine. And that I'm envious. I'm very jealous of that because I can't walk away for a year. That's not the kind of person that I am to just go and do what you do. So on that note, if you could share kind of what you do in Ecuador with that organization, because I think it is a lovely thing what you are able to provide for that community over there too.
Yeah. I guess I never thought of it that way of like, yeah, you're like I am walking away from a lot. Like this is like very much like home for me now, like St.
Hmm.
Louis. And um, I think that right now I'm very much grappling with how I'm going to have to say goodbyes and like like gain closure because I don't know that I'm going to come back after Ecuador. And I
Mm.
think for me, um, Ecuador is definitely, the community that I lived in. It's called Monte Sinai, or like Mount Sinai. Um, it is one of the most important communities that I've been a part of. Um, because I think that pushed me, it pushed me in so many ways, in so many very, very hard ways, and helped me grow a lot. But I think for me, the idea of leaving St. Louis is um, like I was once told in this like professionalism talk, like when you get bored in a job, then you know it's time to move on. And I think that it happened that I've been in this job for 3 years. It's very much an entry level position. Once you learn all the ropes and you do all the things that you can do, like you reach a point where there's not much else different that you can do. And
Sure.
um, for me, I think that I want my profession to be what I'm like very passionate about. And I think that this specific job has like run its course for me. And so when I was starting to look for jobs and like where I would want to go, I was like, like I would love to stay in St. Louis. Sure. Like if I can find a job that I'm passionate about and that like pushes me and allows me to like put my passions into it, I would 100% stay. But before I started really looking for things, this opportunity to go back to Ecuador with Rostro popped up on my radar. They were looking for fellows. So last time I was a volunteer, and this time I will now be a fellow.
A
And at
fellow.
first, yes, a fellow. At first I saw it, that their job posting, and I was like, no, like that's way too much to unpack, like way too much to
Mm,
think about. Like, am I ready to go back? Do I want to work for Rostro again? Do I want to leave St. Louis? Do I want to leave the country?
mhm.
Am I ready for all of that? And I think more so it was the emotional aspect of it, because um, I guess international like exchange work is like really tricky and sticky. Or like
Sure.
anytime you're like any intercultural exchange, it's really tricky. Is like, how do you enter into a space that's in a way that's not exploitative? Because inevitably, like I gain so much in our neighbors that,
Huh.
get volunteers every year, like they gain
Yeah.
like good friends and stuff and like accompaniment and stuff, but like we always gain more.
Mm.
And that, so for me it was like, do I want to be a part of like the problem again? And I think like reframing it to, it's not a problem. There are always going to be problems with this, because it is again a tricky situation when you're entering into a community that's not your own. Like that is something that needs a lot of intentionality thrown into it. um, but I think that I started looking at it more seriously. I like had some conversations with the staff, and um, I think that the first time that I was there, I was contemplating all of these complications and things that I think that Rostro could do differently to make things more mutual, from like between US volunteers and the community, but it wasn't my role to
Uh,
address those. Yeah.
Again, real quick, I know a little bit,
Okay.
but talk about what the organization actually does for the people in
Yeah.
Ecuador.
Okay. So again, Rocha de Cristo, it's a very small nonprofit. They're based out of Boston. It is Catholic based. And so technically, like our title, like we're on missionary visas. We're missionaries. But I
Oh.
think that that has such a heavy and historical connotation,
Mhm.
because it implies people say like missionaries, and you think that we're evangelizing, that we're
Mm.
trying to convert people. And actually, the entire Catholic Church has taken a very radically different stance on that nowadays, because of all the damage they did before,
Oof.
many years ago. Um, but so Rostro sends volunteers from the US, usually recent college graduates, but like anywhere from like 22 to like 28, 29
Okay.
year olds. And so they have gone through different iterations, but essentially they're volunteer houses in what they're called invasion communities, which is like a very popular like phenomenon in Latin America and other, like you have a big city with a lot of job opportunities, and so people from the countryside, from the campo, or like from the mountains, who are being pushed out of their communities because there's no jobs, are coming towards the city, and it's expensive to live in the cities, right? And so there's all this land outside the city. And what happened in the case of these invasion communities were, there were like very wealthy people who owned this land, and they land trafficked the land to all of these like
Oh yeah.
marginalized people coming in,
Mm.
saying, like, yeah, like we'll sell you this land for really cheap, like, and then it's your own. But they never gave them legalized deeds, and the people coming didn't know that they needed that. And
Right.
so the government then has technically the power to come in and kick them off their land, destroy their homes that they've built, and say like, no, this isn't yours, you don't legally own it. And so that has happened a lot in these invention communities. They're called like desalojos.
Mm.
And yeah, you'll see like hundreds of people come and settle on land, build cane homes within the span of like a week. It'll be like nothing, and then there will be a home and a family living there, like a whole community. And then say like a couple weeks go by, like more and more come, and then all of a sudden the police come in and say like, no, you guys have to leave right now. You have like a couple hours to get out, and then they
Oh.
bulldoze the homes.
Holy
And so
wow.
those are the communities that Rostro enters into. We have a volunteer house, and the U.S. volunteers come, and we're very intentional about like having. I guess like there are three main roles that a volunteer does as they're down in Ecuador. Is the first is like their work site placement. They work in like local nonprofits that are already in the community. That way we're not kind of trying to create some like recreate something that's or like already there. And we're
Hmm.
also supporting kind of like a local like empowerment. And so for me, my worksite placement was a community development nonprofit, and I worked in an office doing youth programming to help kind of engage youth in the community in like theater or like arts or whatever it was. Like there was a robotics club, uh, as opposed to, like falling into like drugs or like just like kind of getting them off the street and getting them engaged in things. Um, so worksite placements are kind of like, the main time. And then the second thing is what we call like accompaniment. And so that's kind of like where the missionary part comes in. It's called in the Catholic Church, it's called the ministry of accompaniment, which essentially means like going and like forming a relationship with your like Ecuadorian neighbor and like just sitting that with them and like chatting and like being there, accompanying them like through
Yeah.
all of this stuff that they are having to unjustly experience. And I think that it sounds really basic and simple to people who are like, yeah, but like, what does that do? Like, you're not, changing the systems in place that like put these people in these situations, which is true. But also like people need to know that like we in the US, like as privileged like college graduates and stuff, we actually like we care about them. And not just like in a we don't want people to suffer, but like we know you as a person, we love you as a person, you deserve better than this. So let's all fight for it.
No
As
longer
opposed to like
a
let me help you.
statistic. Yeah, no longer a statistic, but a name. Like this
Yeah.
person has a name, and we want
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
And that's actually like, like the big motto of Rostro is to find the face of Christ in every person.
Mm.
And I think that seems like super simple of like of course like you should see every person as somebody special,
Yeah.
but when you like they're thousands of miles away, like you can care that they're struggling, but like not to the point where it would push you to like want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And so that's also the third part is retreat groups. So we host people from like groups from university and high schools come down to Ecuador, and they stay in like our little like retreat group house, and we give them a chance to get to know the different work placement sites that we work in. For me, it was the community development nonprofit. There's also like a domestic violence shelter for
Mm.
women and children. And then we ask certain neighbors to like welcome the group and share their story a little bit with us. And the groups can like ask them questions, and they can ask questions to the group, and just like this like intercultural exchange, so that it's not just the volunteers who are having this like impactful experience of like, oh crap, like now I know all of these people by name and story in this random community in Ecuador, but it's also like all of these different high school and college
Mm.
students are getting that experience, at least for like 7 days, 6 days. So yeah, those are the three main things that I did like as a volunteer, and that all Rostro volunteers do, and that is Rostro's main mission, is to um, find the face of Christ in every person and allow these privileged, like again, like privileged college graduates to experience this and then go back to the United States, or go back or like enter into whatever community they want to enter into, whatever profession they want to enter into, with these stories in mind, to remember that like we all have to be fighting this like same fight. And
Hmm.
it's not about like me saving them or like them doing it all on their own, but like we all have to like do it together and care equally as much. um yeah.
So a couple things that I want to ask, because just as anyone listening to this now, I knew a very surface level of what you guys do there. Could you A couple things. The work that you guys do when you work with local organizations over there as well, because again, um, since there's already an established base, it makes it easier to operate in another country, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Are there is there solutions, or are they working on solutions for these people that, I mean, we would say over here, unjustly being displaced from their
Mhm.
community continuously, right? They build up cane houses and then get bulldozed, and like that. I think on our end, there'd be some kind of legal precedent, say like this isn't right, or like there was verbal
Mhm.
agreements, and there is a lot of power in a verbal agreement too, even if it's not in writing over here. That's one thing I want to ask. And then two, you had just lightly mentioned, so it made me curious about domestic abuse over there. And you think about, I think it's getting better here in the States a little bit over time, and more awareness about, but in more impoverished communities, more, I mean, I'm not sure if I would call what really defines a third world country or a third world community, but how bad is the domestic abuse scene? Is it pretty common? Is it still, do other communities in Ecuador, like, is it a lot of machismo where like men dominate communities and stuff like that? Or just give me some insight, because I'm learning. Just as anyone watching or listening right now, I don't know. So I just want to learn.
Mhm. Yeah. So starting with the first question, like solutions and like work that's going on in the community. Yeah, I gave that background of like the invasion communities. But the particular community that we lived in, like where our volunteer house is, because they're so again, Ursula has been there for about 30 years. And so they've actually been in several different communities. And so they start in
Uh,
an invasion community. And then usually within like maybe like 10 to 15 years, it'll be like pretty developed. They'll have paved roads, they'll have like brick houses, or like not brick, but like built
yeah,
houses. Everything will kind of like start coming around. And so then they'll move out of that community and move into a new community that's like more recently developing.
yeah.
And so when I was there, there were two houses. This 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, they closed down one of the houses that had been there a while. And so now it's
Mm,
just the one that I was living in Mount Sinai. And but within my immediate neighborhood, neighbors are starting to get like legalized like documents for their land, because there's been a lot of pushback from the communities, saying like we were unjustly sold this land, like we have a right to this land, we paid for it. And it's really really cool because as a part of my work placement, the whole, I guess, mission of OGAR is, it's Hogar de Cristo is the organization, is to like empower local leaders. And
yeah,
so I got to meet these like badass like women from all of the different little like neighborhoods in Mount Sinai who were being trained in like how to talk to government officials, like how to do press reports, how to like essentially like fight for their land. And it was so cool because like I would go to this like we would go downtown and we would be in this like big like fancy meeting room, and all these like mujeres fuertes like would like walk in and they'd be like, yeah, and they're you go to their house and it's still a cane home,
yeah,
and they're like powerful as all get out. And so I think that due to the accompaniment that Ogar has given and like the willpower of people in the community who know that they deserve better and are willing to like give their time, like volunteer their time
yeah,
to make their community a better place, like for themselves, for their families, for their neighbors, like they've gotten a lot of legalized like documents for the land. And so that's been in the works for several years, and it's been kind of cool to follow also from like when I came back, because there will be like news reports and stuff and I'll be like, I met that woman, like that's awesome. And it's just really cool to see that it's not an outside force coming in to like
yeah,
save. It's not the government that's like giving this
yeah,
like solution. It's the people saying no, like we want it.
yeah.
um
It's not like we send
and
them a spokesperson to speak for them. They're speaking for
right,
themselves.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And So, and I think that the legalized access to the land is like the very, very underlying factor of a lot of the other injustices that neighbors have to go through there, of like no running water, no paved streets, no regular collection. Um, if you don't own your own land, how can you demand those other things of the government? And
Yeah.
so that's like very much like first and foremost the big thing that OGAR and like the community development office was like really pushing for was legalized land. And then like they had the other side projects of like trash collection and stuff like that. Um, but without the legalization, like none of the other stuff is going to happen very quickly. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
think, and real quick, I think this is right. Like for as far as like running water goes, there's like a truck that drives to these places every
Yeah.
single day, right? The water truck, which for us would be
Oh,
like the ice cream truck, right? It's just like, ooh, the water's here, you know?
yeah, they're called like tanqueros, and they'll come usually like I think like 3 times a day,
Mhm.
up and down the streets, and they're these giant trucks full of water, and they'll blare this like just like the most obnoxious like high pitched like horn that you've ever heard, and then people will like go outside and they'll be like agua, flag them down, like screaming down the street. And then they'll have like big barrels that they'll fill up with water, and that's how that most people get their water. Some people like have saved up and been able to get running water. The volunteer house itself like
Sure.
is kind of like a palace in the community, which again is like one of the
Things
inequalities that
you struggle with.
comes
Yeah.
about. Yeah. But they have like we have a cistern. So we have like a very like big reserve of water, and then so we have running water.
Okay.
Um but it makes you really conscious of like your water usage because you
Yeah.
see your neighbors like getting their water from barrels.
Yeah.
So
Because I was going to ask for them, the idea of bathing and stuff like that, or it's different, right? Because they don't want to waste that water. So is it the kind of thing where they would go to like a stream or a creek or something? I don't know. Or like,
no,
do they waste water on like showers?
yeah. No, it's actually funny because um just a side story, but when I went to El Salvador for the first time, we did like a 2-day homestay in a community, and like it was bucket showers of like picking up the like, and one of the things that our guide was saying was like, don't be afraid to shower. Like people here like take their cleanliness very seriously.
Oh,
Like just
cool.
because like it's harder for them to shower doesn't mean that they don't do it. And I think that there's a lot more conservation, obviously. Like when you bucket shower, like you're not using like a lot of water at all.
Yeah,
And people like don't wash their hair every day, which I feel like a lot of people here do, which is bad for you anyway. That's another tangent. And also like soap and shampoo are really expensive there.
sure.
They'll buy them
Mm.
like very tiny like squeeze packets and like make it last. But yeah, no, they'll shower
Okay.
every day.
Okay.
um,
All right. And then topic of the domestic abuse then.
Right. And I don't know the statistics or anything, and I don't want to like
Sure.
speak for like in broad generalizations. I think that domestic violence, obviously, and it is going to be higher in marginalized communities always, because of and and then sometimes like culture plays a role in it. So and I think that in our community culture definitely played a role in it, and we as volunteers we were very close with like certain families, right? We
Mm.
had like families that had been close with volunteers for years and years and years, and amongst those families I would say like probably like 80% of the Ecuadorians that volunteers are close with are all women,
Okay.
because sometimes it's because the men in the family aren't there. Sometimes it's because they work a lot and they aren't like they just literally aren't in the house a lot. They're like working. And other times it's because like they're kind of like reserved, um and don't want to like engage in more profound conversations, I guess.
Sure.
So we do know a lot of like our neighbors who have experienced like some form of domestic violence, whether that's like physical abuse, mental abuse, like or what have you. And it's definitely frustrating. It's super
Yeah.
frustrating to see that yeah, like what people have to deal with. And um very like disheartening, I guess too.
Yeah.
That being said, like we do well, it's like it's funny too, not actually funny, but when you meet a guy that's who's like a really, really good husband, a really, really good father, you're like, oh my God, he's amazing.
Yeah.
When it's just like, no, like he's like
That
maybe
should be the
meeting the
norm.
bare standard, like the bare minimum and like going a little bit above and beyond. And he's like a cool person. But
Yeah.
like you're just like, oh, what an amazing guy. So yeah, and I think that I mean the stories from the domestic violence shelter are like rough. Like and two of my community mates worked there, and um, I don't know. I don't think that I would have been able to do a roast show if that were my job placement. Like I
Yeah.
don't think that I had the emotional. I wish I could be that kind of person who has like the emotional capacity to sit and listen to people and like be there for them in these hard things. Um, but I don't think that
Yeah.
like my emotional maturity was there at that time to be able to do that. And so I have all the respect in the world for my two community mates, Vale and Katie, who worked there, and all of the other volunteers who worked there, and for the women themselves, like experience it. Um, there, I think, is a very unfortunately like a with the machismo that you were mentioning, like um a lot of abuse of younger women. Young girls are seen as like, you know, very attractive and like very
Mm.
innocent and like all of these things. And that was probably one of like the worst parts for me is like seeing this 15-year-old with like three kids. Um, yeah. Um, there's just like there's a lot I could say on that, but it's again, I don't want to come off as like generalizing. But it was certainly hard um to live with for a year of like, oh, I can't wear these shorts because then like we'll get
Yeah.
catcalled even more. Um, or I don't want to walk down this street because there's always that like there was some men who would play volleyball every evening. And if you walk down a certain way, then you'd have to walk through the volleyball court and you would get catcalled. And so we would just actively just like go the other way, go the longer
Yeah.
route to store. Um, but knowing that we only had to experience that for a year and everyone else around us, like this was their daily life.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that was frustrating.
I think that frustration is probably the perfect word because frustration comes from a mindset of, or at least in my case, when I think about this, of like maybe a sense of helplessness, right? Where you,
Hmm.
all we can do is sit and listen, right?
Right.
I think about stories I've heard of people that get physically or emotionally abused, in even here in my community that I know of in the States. And listening is sometimes like you can talk to them, you can say, hey, like, why are you allowing yourself to be in this situation, all this other stuff too. But a couple things to think about. One is trying to find rational thoughts from someone in an irrational situation.
Hmm.
It's only going to frustrate you more, right? Um, and I think the hardest part too is those people in those situations. Like at some point, it comes down to they need to get themselves out of the situation. But it's hard, right? I say that not saying that it's easy or that um, that's the frustrating part. Watching people be put in these just horrific situations, being 15-year-olds, three kids, and kind of feeling like there's no end in sight or
Hmm.
kind of just a sense of helplessness there. So I think it's beautiful or such a great thing because at the end, sometimes we don't understand just how important listening is too.
Mhm.
for these people that, where you come to the house and it's just them sharing their story. And then probably for the first time in their life, they meet people that are actually willing to just hear it about it.
Mhm.
Right.
That's the you just defined ministry of accompaniment. So it's listening,
Perfect.
radical
Yeah.
listening.
It's interesting, and this might kind of be the last item I want to touch on is you battling with the idea of privilege when you're over there, living in a palace, right? Um, and you have these. You're working with impoverished people and obviously disenfranchised, and it kind of like I found it to be similar to the idea of like you battling with it, being part of the problem, as you said earlier, with, and this might be a very, very far stretch, but when you're dancing and you don't want to ask the person to dance because they just got done with a really, really great dance partner, right? There's always a better dancer. There's always going to be that big, overlooming, bigger problem that you don't want to associate yourself with, but you have to just jump in, right? I think it comes down to is, I mean, what are your intentions, right? Someone's got to be in that situation. Someone's got to do what you guys do, and then I think they're just fortunate enough that that person's you, right, and not
Mhm.
someone else. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's how I took it. So trying to kind of bring that a little bit more full circle, and hopefully it wasn't too much of a stretch of imagination comparing the two there. I guess if I was to kind of ask you a final thought here, because it almost seems like it was kind of similar in my life where things just kind of happened in this way over the last 6 months or so. Like you said, I don't know if it's because COVID ended, but just like exponential, uh, an exponential kind of change in our communities. How do you go about finding community? Like if you were to give someone advice who feels like they're alone or don't have a passion or whatever it might be, how do you find something that like that?
Yeah. Another I'm really big on like little mantras. And one of our mantras in at WashU cross country that our coach gave us was like 2 feet in. And it came from like he has a young son, and they were at the pool one day, and they were like, he was like, "Are you gonna get in?" And he's like dipped his toe in, and then he's like, "No, 2 feet in, cannonball." And so like I think like just that mantra, like 2 feet in. Like if you want something to happen, like if you want to find community, you have to be 2 feet in.
Mm,
um you might not be the most social person. It might be really uncomfortable for you to like, go to Club Viva alone and stand there, but like if that's something that you want in your life, like be 2 feet in about it. um and I think that yeah, I have found that that is like what has gotten me to the most like profound experiences in my life, whether it be like traveling or community. Sometimes you fall, and I think that's like about the like you have to have humility. But yeah, I think one of my favorite words in Spanish was one that actually one of my community mates, Vale, introduced me to, and it was her favorite word. And she, there's not really a great translation for it. The word is entrega. Um, and I think that the best like phrase in English that like kind of accompanies or like embodies what it means is like 2 feet in. To like entregar. um like if I entregarme to something, I'm like turning my whole self and like giving my whole
uh,
self to that thing, like. And yeah, I think I ended up like getting a necklace with it on it. She now has a tattoo with it on.
uh,
And it's just like this, yeah, like if you really want something, like entregar.
entregar.
Yeah.
Mm,
But
okay. Well, we'll end it there then. thank you for everyone that tuned in today that got to meet Maddie and learn more about her as much as I learned. And I think sometimes we live our lives. I'll use the word ignorant because I'm kind of ignorant, if you will, for a lot of reasons. Maybe coming from an area of not that I don't care, but the things that I care about now are not that, or I'm focused on other things. Is what I'm trying to say. Not I don't care. And so just listening to someone talk about it and share it, some of the stuff going on in the world and finding community because a lot of times we do feel alone and kind of don't know where to start. And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things about life is sometimes it just happens.
Mm,
Um, and I think it was great that you did all of that volunteer work during the pandemic because I think a lot of people felt even more isolated in the pandemic. But there are ways, even in such extraordinary circumstances like that, where you can still find community. I think the summary of the conversation is to be 2 feet in, even if it's 2 left feet, in my case. And as always, if you or anyone you know is going through uh, similar situations to what we talked about, you guys aren't alone. And like Maddie and I were saying earlier, sometimes it's nice just to be heard, talk to people, find someone that's willing to listen. And if you guys feel like you need a friend, you can come meet mine. We'll see you guys all next episode.